Eden Memorial Chapels understands Jewish funerals can take many forms. Some are very Orthodox, while others are more conservative or of a Reformed nature. There's no one better in New York or New Jersey. Go to EdenMemorial.com.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the second hour of the More Money Show. Thanks so much for sticking with us. We are on every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m. We are live. We are in color. And we are going to be taking your callers in just about 20 minutes or so. I've allocated a big amount of time because I want to hear from you all about how you feel about the direction of the country. I want to hear from people who favor Kamala Harris. I want to have a wide-ranging discussion about why, if you do, you think that Kamala Harris would be a better president. Would she be better on the economy? Would she be better on the social issues? Would she be a better commander-in-chief? I really want to hear in a respectful way what you have to say. I learned so much from our listeners. I always say that we have the smartest listeners in the country, which is an amazing thing. But I love to hear from you. I love to hear your opinions, and I love to hear your facts as well. And so we will be doing that. I want to remind you all of the More Money hotline number, 1-800-848-9222. I believe, Christian, is that the right number? Yeah, 1-800-848-9222. I'm sorry. Let me say that again. 1-800-848-9222 or 1-800-848-WABC. So I want to hear from you about the economy. I want to hear from you about, here's another one I want to ask you about. I had a fascinating conversation in the previous hour with David Stockman, who was Ronald Reagan's first budget director. And he was talking about how hard it is to cut government spending. I don't know why it is, but it's like pulling teeth trying to get Congress, Republicans or Democrats to cut even the most wasteful spending programs. I wonder if you all have good ideas about programs we could eliminate. What is it in the budget? We're going to have to eliminate hundreds and hundreds of programs. I mean, we're spending $2 trillion more than we bring in, and we can raise revenues through growth, but we also are going to have to take a hatchet to the budget. And I want to hear if you have any good ideas of programs you think we could live without. I'll give you one idea. Let's just get rid of foreign aid. I mean, we're running a $2 trillion deficit. We don't have free money being passing out to other countries. And I'm not so sure that any of this foreign aid is actually helping the countries it's supposed to help. And even the money to Ukraine, I don't even know how much of that money that we've got, hundreds of billions of dollars, how much of it is actually getting to the Ukrainians? We don't even know the answer to that. They never audit these programs. They don't tell us where the money went. They just said, it's like, we'll just assume that the money went to the people we thought it would when it gets intercepted by these big Beltway Band-Aids. I'm just disgusted by it, frankly. And when I was talking to David Stockman earlier, I was mentioning that he looked at programs that were obsolete 40 years ago. He had recommended getting rid of those. And here we are 40 years later. We still have these programs. We didn't need them 40 years ago. We still need them. I mean, we still have them. We're still funding them at bigger budgets than ever. But I would get rid of foreign aid. I would close down the U.S. Department of Education, and I'd save some of the money. And then the other money I would just give to parents and let them choose the best schools for their kids. I would eliminate the Department of Energy. I mean, what has the Department of Energy ever done? So tell me one good thing the Department of Energy has done. It's actually held up our energy production in this country. I don't think we need 400 regulatory agencies making rules and regulations. We don't even know who these people are. They were never elected to anyone. So I want to hear if you have any thoughts about programs that we no longer need. I'm going to interview my good friend Norm Champ in a minute. He is somebody I've been really eager to talk to again. He was on the show about a month and a half ago, and I heard so much positive feedback from when he was on. I wanted to bring him on again. And the issue that I'm going to talk to Norm Champ about is this new policy that has been implemented by the Securities and Exchange Commission to monitor and to keep track of every single stock transaction that every single American makes. I think it's outrageous. I think it's a violation of our rights of privacy and our Fourth Amendment rights against illegal searches and seizures. So I'm going to talk to Norm about that in a minute. But I wanted to get to one point before I do, and that is, I hope you're all getting our Unleash Prosperity hotline every morning. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about this show are stories that we've uncovered in Unleash Prosperity. By the way, this is free. It costs you nothing. Just go to unleashprosperity.com, sign up, give us your email where there's no advertising. There's no fee to this. I just want our listeners to be on top of all the hot issues and the scandals that are going on in Washington. Now, here's a scandal that I find to be outrageous. Let's see, what are we, 18 or so days before what I think is the most important election since 1980 in this country. And, a lot of states are trying to clean up their voting rolls so that only legal people are voting and not people who are illegally registered to vote. Maybe they're not of the right age, maybe they're not actually 18, or maybe they're not a citizen, or maybe they have other disqualifying aspects, or maybe they've already registered somewhere else and they're registering twice or 3 times or 4 times, or maybe they're not of sound mind. Whatever it might be, we want to make sure that people who are voting are eligible to vote. I don't understand why the Democrats are so opposed to that. Every time we say we've got to clean the voting rolls, they say, oh, voter suppression. I don't want to suppress anyone's vote. I don't care if they're black, white, green, yellow. I don't care what color of their skin, what ethnicity. I want people who are eligible to vote to vote. That's your responsibility as a citizen. But think about this. If you have thousands and thousands of people in your district that are not eligible to vote that are voting, what they're doing is they're disenfranchising you. They're taking away your right to vote because they're canceling your vote out. You see what I'm saying? So this is anti-democracy to allow people who are not allowed to vote or not eligible to vote to vote. So my friend Glenn Youngkin, who is the governor of Virginia, did just what I'm talking about. He cleaned out the rolls. He looked at all the people who are registered in Virginia, and they found it just their first go through, they found 6,300 people who were registered to vote that were not eligible to vote for one reason or another. Either they didn't live in the state, or they were not 18 years old, or they were not a citizen. And so God bless Glenn Youngkin. He did a public service. He said, okay, these 6,300 people can't vote because they're not eligible. And the federal government is saying, no, you can't take those people off the voter rolls. I'm serious. The Biden administration said, no, you can't do that within 100 days of an election. So they want these people to vote illegally. I'm going to say that again, folks. You can tell by the tone of my voice, I'm angry about this. They want these people who are not eligible to vote, even though we know they're not eligible to vote because of some Byzantine rule they're making up. I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot of voter fraud this year, and I hope that you all are going to be watching the polls. And if you want to do a service, sign up as a poll watcher and make sure they're not engaging in funny business with the ballots, because we want to make sure that this is a clean election. And if Kamala Harris wins in a clean election, I will be sad. I'll be depressed, but I'm not going to revolt in the streets or anything like that. But let's make sure that the right candidate who won the most votes and won the most electoral votes is the candidate who is the president of the United States, not someone who gets in because of stolen votes. That's all I'm saying. And the federal government, the Biden administration says, no, you have to allow these people to vote, even though they're not legally entitled to vote. I'm just dumbfounded by that. All right. I want to now turn to my friend Norm Champ. I'm going to calm down for a minute because you can tell I'm really angry about that, folks. I mean, come on. We cannot allow illegal immigrants to vote. We cannot allow people who are not eligible to vote in this country. It is destroying our democracy, and it is taking away your right to vote when someone votes illegally. Okay, so Norm Champ is a good friend of mine. I've met him a few years ago. He's one of the world's expert on securities law. He was a member of the Securities and Exchange Commission. I hope when Donald Trump wins, he becomes the next chairman of that commission. Norm, you have a new book out. By the way, thanks again for joining, Norm. Great to be with you.
Great to be here, Steve. Great to listen to the program, and look forward to talking with you.
Okay, so thanks again for coming on. Before we get to the issue of the day, tell people about your book, because you've been sending me data about how we just don't have enough publicly traded companies anymore because of the regulations and the costs.
Yep. So I have two books out there. They're a little bit older, but one is Going Public, which is about...
Yes, that's the one. That's the one that I read about 9 months ago. Great book.
Yep. And that's about, kind of what it's like to work inside one of those 400 agencies that you mentioned, and just, how there are real challenges in managing these agencies because, as you said, of the bureaucracy and the rules they're putting out. And so, that really describes that. Mastering Money is about my other book is about, all of us trying to get our personal finances, in order and think about how to budget wisely. And I think a key part of that is saving for retirement. And you mentioned David Stockman. Think about Ronald Reagan, Steve. The Reagan Revolution and turning retirement, creating the ERISA Act under Ronald Reagan created the 401ks and the IRAs. The vast majority of Americans rely on those accounts for their retirement. Yes. And that also gave the vast majority of Americans a stake in U.S. capital markets. Because those accounts can only invest in liquid securities, so primarily public stocks or public forms of debt. And so our big crisis right now is that the number of public companies that those accounts can invest in have declined by half since the 1990s, and the Biden SEC continues to load disclosure requirements, accounting requirements, lawsuit, enabling people to sue public companies. Right. And it's dwindling the number of investment choices that all of us have in our retirement. By
the way, just to interrupt you for 1 second, my good friend who owns Continental Energy is basically, he took his company private. Continental was a public company. And he said he was so fed up with all the regulations, all the excess costs, all the auditing requirements, that he said we can make more money if we go private. So you're in fact, usually a company, right, Norm, starts private and then it goes public. Now we're seeing companies go the opposite direction. I think it's because of exactly what you've put your finger on, the high cost of going public.
100%. And so much of this is politically driven, Steve, right? So mandating disclosure by these companies on these political hot topics of the day, ESG, pay ratio of the CEO to the frontline worker, those are just political items, right? We've gotten this far as a country with a standard that said all these public companies must disclose what's material. What's material 50 years ago is different than what's material now, and it's different than what it will be 50 years in the future. And it evolves, and it's a standard that grew this country and grew our incredible wealth that we have in this country. Right. And they're ditching that for, you've got to talk about this, you've got to talk about that. And companies, it's very expensive to do that. And if you get it wrong, you get sued. And of course, a lot of people settle those suits because they don't want to fight them. So all of this is just piling cost after cost on public companies just when we need them more because all the 401ks and IRAs need to invest in them. So we've got to turn.
I think that's a really critical point that, we all, almost everyone listening to the show has a 401k or a retirement plan or a pension, and it's invested in the stock market. But if you have a dwindling number of companies, if it's all Google and Apple and Amazon and NVIDIA and just a handful of them, you don't have the diversity that you want in your portfolio. And so, by the way, when you were talking about these regulations and edicts that the government's putting on these public companies, do these also include ESG? Like, you have to have, certain people on the board and, quotas and things like that. What kind of directives are you talking about?
So most of the things that I was just mentioning are either in the Dodd-Frank Act, back from post-crisis, or in rules that have come along since then. The specific board requirements that you're mentioning, those have been imposed by the stock exchanges and approved by the SEC, right?
Okay.
So there needs to be a close look taken at those stock exchange requirements, right?
Yes.
Because, all these things are so antithetical to the health of American retirements. Back to your point on diversity, as I think we've talked about before, the top 10 stocks by market value comprise 1/3 of the S&P 500 stock index.
Yeah, right.
So
if those companies go down, they take the whole stock market down with them.
100%. And we're really, as you said, risk diversification is a problem, but also access to innovative companies. Wouldn't we all like to be able to invest in some new up-and-coming company? But instead, that company says, hey, I don't want to be out there in the firing line and have to pay for all this disclosure and have people upset with me and so forth. And so this is a real risk to America.
It is. Okay, so I want to get to something that has me hopping mad. There's a lot that has me hopping mad today. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about was this story that we reported on our hotline this week about the SEC now basically snooping on every single stock transaction that every American is making. There must be billions of these, and compiling and again, this stuff better than I do. But apparently they're building a big database of all who owns what. I don't want the government knowing if I own Microsoft or if I own AT&T or if I own Google or if I'm selling this stock or that stock. I just find this to be a very dangerous thing, Norm. And I want your reaction. Are you familiar with this story? Are you familiar with what's going on? And am I exaggerating the dangers of this?
Not in the least. It is something called the Consolidated Audit Trail. And this has been
I don't like it already.
Right. Just the name is not great. And this has been going on. This project's been going on literally, I think it's something like a decade, and these are, and just to tie into what we were talking about, the cost of this project, Steve, is such a burden on our markets. So all the exchanges are supposed to report all this data. That means all the brokers. Well, those costs translate right into what we were just talking about the cost of being a public company. So those exchanges are charging more to the public companies because of this huge project. So it's another factor in what we were discussing about the decline in public companies. The second thing, as you alluded to, what's going to be done with all of that data, right? So think about the massive amount of that data. And point three, I was in the government for 5 years, Steve. The technology inside the government lags the private sector by 5 to 10 years at least.
Oh, my God.
We're going to have all this data inside, these places, maybe the markets, maybe at the government. The risk of that data being hacked or used by someone or accessed by people who aren't friendly to us. A lot of these things are national security issues, right?
I agree.
Do we really want all of that data somewhere that someone might get into?
No. I mean, the obvious answer to that question is no. And I'm just flabbergasted that this is happening at the SEC. And Norm, I mean, I hope when you become the chairman of the SEC, and I think there's a good chance that you will be, that's one of the reasons I love having you on your show, because you're such an expert on the securities issues. And I know, folks, these are kind of mundane issues, but they're really important to your financial privacy and your financial security. And I hope that you could just bring an end to this program. I don't think the government needs to know what Dick or Harry or Jane is buying and holding and selling in their stocks. I don't see any public purpose to that.
And it's all part of all the things we've been talking about, Steve, which is, okay, the public employees in the state and local level, their pensions are mostly invested in private equity funds, right? Those funds are not available to everybody in the country because they have very high thresholds for how much wealth you have to have. What's available to all of us is public stocks. And so why, through this consolidated audit trail, all these rule proposals, all these requirements, why the attack on public companies where all the rest of us need our retirements? It makes
we
no
own them.
sense.
Yeah, right.
Exactly right. I mean, it makes no sense. And as we've talked about before, so much of this is just common sense.
Yes.
All of our fellow Americans are investing in these retirement accounts. Let's make as many investment choices available for them. Let's help them de-risk. Let's help them grow their money so that they have a wonderful retirement. Like, why would we be doing these things? It just defies common sense.
So one last thing on the way out, and this is more of an economic question. I don't know if it's in your wheelhouse, but, my friend Jeff Yass and I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal the other day noting the fact that if you increase the corporate income tax and then you increase the capital gains tax, essentially you're taxing people's stock ownership, obviously, because Americans own the companies. And the higher tell me if you think I'm right or wrong on this, that the more that the government taxes the corporations, the less profits that are available to the rest of us. And we all own these companies. So it's going to hurt our 401k plans and our retirement funds. Is that right?
Couldn't agree more. I loved your piece. I read it with interest, and I agree. It's yet another way that they are attacking companies. And what we need right now, you alluded to it earlier, what we need at this moment is economic growth to help us with these deficits and help us pay down this debt. And something like this that basically, I was on a panel once with a tax lawyer, Steve, and he said, one thing is unalterably true. If you tax something, you have less of it.
That's Norm Champ, folks. Norm, thanks so much. We're up against a hard break. Great thoughts and great information for us. Folks, we will be right back, and we will be taking your calls. 1-800-848-9222 is the More Money hotline, and we'll be taking your calls in 1 minute.
Talk Radio 77 WABC.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it. Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.